Well, it's really lovely to see you all. At one moment when I was stuck in Basingstoke, I thought I might never see anybody again, frankly. So it's a joy to be here and wonderful to see you all. I'm Sarah Thomas. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. I am indeed head of Bryanston School, a co-ed boarding school, and you'll find it in 400 acres of gorgeous Dorset countryside. We're lucky enough to have bought in, 1928, a beautiful stately home. So we are really very fortunate in our surroundings, and I'm very proud to be head of such a wonderful and flourishing school. I'm going to start with a silly story because I usually do. Some of you may know it, for which apologies, but it's the story of a mummy camel and her baby camel. The baby camel one day asks his mummy camel, "Mummy, why do we have these enormous humps on our backs?" "Well," says mummy camel, "those humps are full of water, and they're to stop us getting thirsty as we trudge day after day through the sandless wastes of the Sahara Desert." And the baby camel considers this and chews ruminatively and says, "Why have we got such enormous floppy feet then?" And mummy camel replies, "That's so we can do all that trudging, day after day, mile after mile, through those rocky, sandy expanses of the Sahara Desert." And the baby camel chews this new bit of information over in his baby camel mind and asks, "Mum, why are we in Chessington Zoo then?" A little story about belonging. And in my view, belonging is the thing that matters most when you're thinking about choosing a school for your child. And the good news is, whether you are already a believer in single-sex or in co-education, the independent sector offers a complete rainbow of choice. And every independent school is pretty unique. My husband's of the opinion that we could never open up a version of Bryanston overseas. So much does our uniqueness depend upon our home. We couldn't possibly replicate 400 acres of Dorset in Dubai. He's prepared to have a go in Hawaii. In terms of location, background, history, ethos, character, outlook, every different school, independent school, really is unique to itself. They're independent and they're free to develop the way they want to. Some time ago, I was deputy head at Uppingham School in Rutland. Some of you may not have heard of Rutland. It's a teeny weeny county, and it has two fine, brilliant independent schools, one called Uppingham and the other called Oakham. They were founded in the same year by the same man. They're about 5 miles apart, but because they're independent, they've developed completely individual paths. They're excellent schools, and so different they barely compete in the same marketplace. Each independent school really is unique because they are independent. And I know that's bad news for you, because you've got to then choose which one's right for your child. So I'll talk a bit about that, but first of all, the big picture. Years ago, when I taught at Sevenoaks School, a friend of mine said he thought the world was split into Platonists and Aristotelians. Platonists have a blueprint for the world and for life. Plato wrote a book all about blueprints and perfection. It's called The Republic. Aristotelians, on the other hand, aim for what is good, but also for what works. They're not so keen on blueprints and tend to be less prescriptive and more pragmatic. In the current debate about what schools ought to be, as far as I'm concerned, there's a bit too much Platonism. So many people have a particular interest in education in the public sector, usually because they believe that they once upon a time went to school themselves. They think they have all the answers. Theirs is the only way of doing it, the only possible blueprint for success in life. It's often a very narrowly defined success. I wonder if those battle lines about single-sex or co-ed are actually the most platonic bit of battle in the whole educational argument. I won't call it a debate, because the conversation's been going on for so many years now. All the arguments have been rehearsed to death, and positions are so entrenched, it's arid and fruitless as an exchange. And if you're expecting me to have a fight with Liz, you're going to be sadly disappointed. I think I'm going to say some things which Liz will say, yes, I quite agree, at least I hope so, Liz. Yeah. Let's have a go at looking at a few details. Scientific evidence, such as it is. In 2005, the US Department for Education, that's the US, looked at over 100 studies into academic achievement at single-sex and co-ed schools. For every single study that suggested achievement was higher in single-sex, 2 studies reported there was no such evidence. Here in the UK, the jury's still out. There is no game-changing evidence. You're not going to be able to solve this conundrum simply by looking at statistics. There are statistics, of course, and some of them show that single-sex schools get better exam results. But 1/3 of single-sex schools are grammar schools. 60% of single-sex schools are in the independent sector. In other words, it's complicated. And personally speaking, I'm about as convinced with that sort of statistical evidence as I am by the average toothpaste commercial. Now, there are 2 famous cheerleaders for single-sex education. One's called Leonard Sachs. He wrote a book called Why Gender Matters, and another called Michael Gurian, who wrote a wonderfully titled book, The Wonder of the Boy. Sachs claims that girls hear better than boys. Gurian asserts that girls don't have the brain structures to study high-level maths and science. I don't like that pink brain, blue brain stuff at all, and I can't imagine that Liz does either. If you believe it, then girls have to be taught maths and science very slowly, and boys have to be taught everything using a megaphone. So you can believe that if you want, or we can talk about what matters, the individuals. I think that's what matters, the individuals. Confession. I went to an all-girls school myself. I went to a very good girls' public day school trust, as they were called then, on the Wirral. You may be able to hear some of that in my vowels still. I always say, without any evidence at all, that it did me no harm. I must confess again that I really wished that I had gone to a school with more opportunities than I was offered in the 70s on the Wirral at my all-girls school. But that was the 70s. And I certainly wished that I had encountered boys in classrooms before I went to Oxford. When I was at school, my father taught English at an all-boys school in Liverpool. In the 6th form, I was learning Tessa the d'Urbervilles in my all-girls school. He was teaching Tessa the d'Urbervilles in his all-boys school. I was taught by a remarkable American, that was exotic in Birkenhead in the 70s, a remarkable American female teacher in my all-girls set. And one evening at dinner, I mentioned to my father we'd been studying the passage in Tessa the d'Urbervilles where she sees Angel in the garden. And our American teacher, Avril Locke, even her name was glamorous, had said, I guess he may as well be playing a harp. All the girls had wanted to vomit. My father said he'd been teaching the same passage in an all-boys school in Liverpool, and all the boys could not believe that Tess could be so moronic as to choose Alec over the perfect Angel. And he said, put those 2 conversations together and you might have the makings of a really interesting class. As a teacher, I'm a co-educational fan because I enjoy teaching boys and girls. I like both boys and girls. I believe they learn a lot from each other. And I believe socially, it preserves them from too much alpha behaviour of their own gender. I know a fair bit about alpha females, and I've learned a lot more in my 30 years of teaching in co-educational schools about alpha males. To me, the benefits of co-ed for girls have always been entirely transparent. However, I remember very clearly the boy who was 13 and a half, who explained to me why he was keen to move to a co-ed environment from a single-sex school. And I quote him, "I know exactly how I will turn out if I stay at this school. The boys in my house are supposed to turn out in a certain way, and I don't want to do that." He was an Aristotelian stuck in a Platonic landscape. He transferred to Bryanston and was one of the most successful Bryanstonians I can think of. Bit of the flip side. As a head, I hear lots of reasons why parents prefer single sex. Here's one. It reminds me of my own childhood. My daughter will go to a single sex school because I did myself and it didn't do me any harm. That's fine, but I wonder how many decisions people are prepared to make on the basis of what their parents did 20, 30 years ago. My parents used to drive an Austin Allegra. Unlikely, I know, so I'm going to buy the same car. Here's another favourite. I want my son to be able to concentrate on the things that matter. In other words, work. Away from distractions, otherwise girls. In that, and the whole business of how schools have changed, I'm very strongly reminded of my boss at Uppingham, Stephen Winkley, who used to deal with parents who thought boarding schools were still Spartan, monastic, ancient temples to bad food and cold showers. And when parents described schools like that to him, a modern boarding school headmaster, he would simply say, "I'd love to go to Australia, but I can't stand 3 weeks on a boat." Times really have changed. They've changed in terms of the way we do boarding, and they've changed in terms of single sex and co-education. The baby camel's problem, of course, was that he didn't want to be in Chessington Zoo. Lots of baby camels might want to be precisely in Chessington Zoo. I think the point is, it's all about belonging and where your child feels comfortable and where you too feel comfortable with how your child is learning and growing. So, finally, when it comes to finding the right school for your child, you are in a really fortunate position because every independent school has their different features, and you will find one, I promise you, as individual as your child. What matters most is finding that right fit. So, my advice is think about your child's character, their interests, their gifts, their talents, their strengths and their weaknesses. Talk to the head of their current school. They will know an awful lot about your child. They may even know some things you don't know about your child. I know that from experience myself. And they will know a lot about the senior schools. Then, with their advice, get out there and visit some of the schools. Visit the ones that your prep school head is suggesting are good to look at. I seriously would not at that point get caught up in the single sex or co-ed farrago of nonsense. I would simply look at good schools and then see which is the one that fits your child. Your decision, and it is your decision, in my view, it's your decision, has to be firmly about which school is best suited to your child. Will they be happy? Will they be inspired? Will they build the right sort of confidence that will enable them to push themselves to be the very best? Belonging is the key. The rest is a sideshow. And remember, as the classicist Heraclitus said, all things are in flux. What suits a child at 8 might not be right for that same child at 13. That was certainly the case with my older daughter. Focus upon finding the right environment in which your boy or girl will flourish and grow, and then it really will be job done, whether you're bred a Platonist or an Aristotelian. Enjoy visiting all these wonderful schools, and thank you so much for listening. I'll hand you on to Liz now.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Sarah. And we, in fact, only met briefly before this to talk about what we were going to say. And I'm sure it's no great surprise to actually learn that we're very much coming from the same place. As you heard in the introduction, I am the headmistress of a girls' school, St George's, Ascot. I've been in post for the grand total of about 7 weeks, and it is my first headship. So St George's, we are a small girls' boarding and day school of just under 300 girls, set in 30 acres just outside London in Ascot. We have a mixture of about half and half boarders and day girls, and of the boarders, some board during the week, and we get a number of girls coming from West London, and then we have a number of girls who are also full boarders who come from all over the place. And in terms of my experience, I too went to all-girls school. I went to an all-girls prep school and then an all-girls senior school before going on to university. And I, like Sarah, have taught in a variety of different schools, which has given me a good range of experience in both co-ed and single-sex schools. But for me, that's also big schools, small schools, boarding schools, day schools. I've taught all boys, co-ed, all boys, all girls, and now all girls again. Of course, outside school, we also get to see as heads a number of different schools. I'm a governor of a co-ed boarding school, senior school, and also inspecting. I inspect schools with ISI. So as with all heads, we get to experience a range of schools. And schools are all remarkably similar in some respects. We all teach maths, we all teach English, we all do sports, we all do music, we all do drama. You will read many websites that say we educate the whole child. It's about an all-round education, and I'm sure as parents you see many of these mantras time and time again. And therefore I think what is most important for you is identifying what makes each school different. And of course I've written that before listening to what Sarah says, but of course the fantastic thing about the independent sector and why we feel that an opportunity for you today to see so many fantastic schools is all about choice. So my job when people visit my school, St George's, is that when they come to see me individually or as part of an open morning, the main aim that I feel is I want them to get a really strong sense of what the school is and also what the school isn't. We're very proud of what our school is, and we're very proud of what we do, and therefore it really has to be a fit between what you want for your child and what we offer. If it's not a fit and if it doesn't feel right, it's not going to be the right school for your child, and also perhaps for you and for what you want as a family. And one of the things that we are is an all-girls school, and that goes some way to explaining and describing the environment in which we are, but of course it's one of many things. And I agree that it can be quite dangerous and misleading to group schools into single-sex and co-ed. You've got small schools, you've got medium-sized schools, you've got very big schools. You've got boarding schools, you've got purely day schools, you've got schools that are a mixture of both. You've got schools that go from 3 to 18, you've got prep schools, you've got schools that go from 13 to 18 and focus on a smaller age group. There's a real variety within the sector. And parents that choose our school are buying into what we're about. So for us, that means they're buying into the small size of the school. We're just under 300 girls. It's nurturing. We can guide their daughters. We have very happily a range of academic ability. We're not a top slicing academic school. And again, that for us is as important as whether we are girls or co-ed, boarding or day. Parents that choose single-sex schools, girls' schools, but parents that choose our school in particular believe that it is the very best setting for their child to grow up in what can be their very precious teenage years. Co-ed schools can be fantastic. There are a fantastic range of co-ed schools out there, and I believe they can be fantastic if they are truly focused on both genders. Sometimes we can have schools that are boys' schools with girls, and less often, but girls' schools where boys have been introduced. And in those circumstances, girls or boys, if it's the other way around, are not necessarily placed front and centre. There are many great schools that have been co-ed for a very long time, where they perhaps have a more challenging job. My school, we can focus on one sex, and we can focus on what we feel is best for the girls. There are many schools that do that fantastically with both sexes, and of course with boys as well. At our school, the parents that choose us feel that the girls don't grow up with subliminal messages. We don't have the head boy and then the head girl, the rugby results and then the lacrosse girls, the lacrosse results. The girls or boys, if it's a boys' school, they feel that they can be themselves in the classroom. Certainly, parents say to me, perhaps it suits their daughter that they can sit in the classroom, put their glasses on, put their hand up, have a go in a very supportive environment which fosters success and breeds confidence. There is an argument, of course, that the big wide world is co-ed, and we've rehearsed, we have a number of these discussions. I think that, as Sarah said, the word argument, perhaps it's something historic, that the heads and those of us that get asked to do debates like this think, oh goodness, really, we're not in an argument here. We all think there's fantastic schools, we all agree, and therefore, perhaps I suppose debate is a slightly better word. Of course, I think what is important when we think about the big adult world being co-ed is actually that the world of 14 and 15-year-olds is not the adult world. 13, 14, 15-year-olds are in a very different world. That is not necessarily real life. So the school that you should be looking for your child is one that you feel will be guiding them in the way in which they can learn the tools to cope with, if I ask many of you, I can imagine, do we all want to go back to being 14 and 15? I doubt there's very many people in the room that would say, yes, that's a great time of my life. It's tough. It's tough. The girls, in my school, their friendships are changing, their bodies are changing, their brains are changing. The poor children's lives are documented, commented on social media. That isn't the world we grew up with, and therefore you should be looking for a school that is going to support your child in a way you feel you are comfortable with, to help support them make the right decisions. The fact that they can be at a school where perhaps, for my girls, they don't have to wear makeup, they're not particularly worried about what they look like. It may be very different when they go out at the weekends. We often see a real change in our pupils, but actually that they can be themselves. They can be themselves, and they can enjoy growing up. And I know certainly parents in London, often I see parents who are attracted by schools outside London, of which both of ours are. Well, perhaps they don't feel they have the pressure of growing up so quickly. And again, that's not a single-sex and co-ed debate. That's perhaps being in a big city and being in a more rural environment debate. So again, as another example of where perhaps there are so many different categories that you should be thinking about, that perhaps single-sex and co-ed isn't the only one. Of course, there is a challenge to single-sex schools and schools such as mine, that we need to be making sure there is interaction with the opposite sex. And therefore, if you are looking at a single-sex school, you should be asking, how do they interact? What opportunities are there? and not just social opportunities, but opportunities such as debating or societies with other schools that are nearby of the opposite sex. That's important, and that's something that single-sex schools such as mine we take very seriously, and that we work very hard to do, so that actually we want to prepare the children so that when they get to university, they are able to be very comfortable in an academic and social setting with children of the opposite sex. My feeling, as I said at the very beginning, is that schools need to be very clear about what they are about, and you need to be very clear as parents when you are looking for schools about what the important things are for you, and when you go and visit a school that you can come away saying, I know what that school's about. That school is this, this, this and this. And if that's something that fits with what you want for your individual child, and it may be very different for your different children, that if that's something that's good, then you take that further. But actually, it's no bad thing to go to a school and think, I know what that school's about, and that's not for us. And to be confident to say, actually, therefore, we need to go and look at a wider range of schools. This morning, I spoke to my two children, one of whom's at a single-sex school and one of whom's at a co-ed school, and I think that exemplifies the situation we're all in. There are a number of reasons that my children are at different schools. It suits them best. It's the area we're in. My children are fairly young. I want to be fairly close to them. It suits my lifestyle, our job, all the sorts of things that parents are considering. I said to my son, who's at an all-boys school, what do you think is best, single-sex or co-ed? He said, oh, single-sex. My daughter's at a co-ed prep school. I said to her, what do you think? She said, oh, definitely co-ed. And I think that really exemplifies the way we feel. And I come back to my initial point, which echoes exactly what Sarah said at the very beginning, is that the fantastic thing about the independent sector, for your individual child, there is choice. And that is something that you should really explore as you move forward on this very important and difficult decision. Thank you.